Hello, good day. So I'm still inside as it's still windy and kind of overcast and hard to hear me with all the winds. So today's reading log is reading log 13, chapter 15. And I just want 6 sentences of what happens today. That's it. It's chapter 15. It's titled Bright Sword, Dim Brother. Well, I thought as I pulled myself out from under Dusty on the hill that overlooks St. Jean, how many more stupid mistakes can I make before my time actually runs out? I guess that explains what killed me that time in the topiary maze. People had said the Queen was there with Wulfgar, but when I had seen Kendrick, I assumed they had gotten the wrong son. Right son, just not human at the moment. Thank you very much. Do you remember when she got killed, when she heard a growl behind her in the topiary maze, and then something jumped on her and she felt a pain in her neck? That was Wulfgar in his wolf form. What was going on at the Rasmussen Gaming Center? Were they making any headway in overriding the damage to the system so that they could pull me out? Nigel Rasmussen hadn't sounded as though he thought that was likely. I figured if there had been any real possibility of help from their end, Mr. Rasmussen would have played that up to keep me from panicking. My optimism didn't improve when I found myself once more standing in front of the statue of St. Bruce, the warrior poet, realizing I couldn't remember the poem I had made up last time. An ode to St. Bruce, I said, which was, after all, I remembered. Which was all that I remembered. Faradonia yawned loudly while she waited for me to start. You'd think someone who created a poem would be able to remember it. You'd think. I recited, St. Bruce was a warrior poet. Oh, no, that wasn't right. That wasn't right. Too late, I remembered that my former first line had ended with Bruce, which rhymed nicely with loose, juice, and Bruce. All sorts of possibilities. What did poet rhyme with? He lived in a cave, don't you know it? Was that a little whimper I heard from Faradonia? He wrote sonnets and verses. He never said curses. As the moment stretched on and on, I saw Faradonia avert her gaze from the sword that hung over me. She began to edge her way towards the cave entrance. No doubt red blood makes a mess of green clothing. Well, anything's better than nothing. All in a rush, as though that would prevent St. Bruce from hearing my way too many beats in the line, I finished, he'll give you one chance, please don't blow it! I was aware of Faradonia hurling herself to the floor, out of the way of both the sword and blood splatter. I was sure the sword wavered in Bruce's hand, but it didn't come down. Sounding astonished, Faradonia said, he must be in a good mood. Lucky you. He's accepted your poem. So once again, Sir Deming and I were off to the castle, with the ring once more tied to my bodice laces. As we rode, I tried to decide what I should do once we got there. Wulfgar, obviously I shouldn't trust a man who had wolf instincts and who had already killed me twice. Who knew what might make him lose his temper with me and cause him to bite my head off, literally. Queen Adriana kept rebuffing all my attempts to be nice to her, so that left just Kendrick and Abbess. I had chosen Kendrick once before, and Mr. Rasmussen had warned me away from him. Kendrick and Sister Mary Ursula don't work well together, he said. That was fine with me. Sister Mary Ursula and I didn't work well together either. I've been planning on asking Rawdon to be my counselor anyway. Except except Mr. Rasmussen had given me the warning that before I had ever met Sister Mary Ursula. Did that mean I was supposed to work with her? But she doesn't like magic, I reminded myself. Maybe I was supposed to ask her to be my advisor, and then I wasn't supposed to follow her advice. Mr. Rasmussen could have saved us both a lot of aggravation by talking faster and more clearly, I thought. Talk to your father before you leave St. John, he could have said. Choose Abbess and Sister Mary Ursula and whatever. However, many more chances I had left, I suspected I was going to need every one of them. In the great hall, I called, Abbess, as Queen Adriana yet again started to walk off in a huff after our family reunion. What? The middle brother prince demanded, sounding like a petulant second grader for all that he looked like the after picture of an advertisement for expensive home exercise equipment. Nice sword work, I said, back there while you were menacing me. Oh. He sounded both pleased and surprised. Pleased won out. I am quite good, he admitted. His mother didn't wait for him. His brothers were definitely trying to make it out of the room before bursting into laughter. Abbess whipped his sword out of the sheath and moved its edge within an inch of my nose. Now what? He didn't slit my throat or give me an instant rhinoplasty, he said. Toledo steel. And because he sounded proud and cheery, I gathered that this was a good thing, and said, How nice. He began talking about the wonderfulness of Spanish-crafted swords and gave me the entire history of manufacturing blades, making my eyelids grow heavy with terms and phrases like heat-tempered and alloy and strong but not brittle. All the while, I kept moving him toward the courtyard, wondering if I'd make it in time to rescue the poacher from the guards, or if I'd collapse in a bored stupor first. The poacher and I lucked out. Prince Abbess, the guard I now knew was named Penrod called out, and Princess Justine. Janine, I told him. Captain Penrod shrugged and told Abbess, We caught this boy poaching. He killed the deer. The usual punishment. I waited to hear Abbess's reaction, just as, that first time, Kendrick had waited to hear mine. Certainly, Abbess said. Then, as the boy was starting to explain how he had found the dead deer, Abbess eagerly offered, Shall I? Once more he brought his sword forth with that metal-on-metal whisper hiss that gives goosebumps to any sensible person. No, I told Abbess. I motioned for the second guard, who forced the boy to his knees to let him up again. Abbess frowned in concentration. No, he repeated, as though unfamiliar with the word. My new reign is starting, I announced to one and all. This is a time to review the old laws and to reconsider the old punishments. Abbess pouted. No more beheadings? I didn't want him to turn against me, since this was obviously a tradition he cherished. Not for now, anyway. My first day should be a time of clemency, of people starting anew, with nothing from the past held against them. This might be a way to settle the peasants' unrest. Clemency? Abbess repeated, obviously downhearted. You mean no more public hearings? Princess, Penrod said. No, I told Abbess. Princess, Penrod repeated. A friendly warning here. The peasants need a firm hand, or they will run wild and take advantage. Hand? Can I at least chop off his hand? Abbess echoed. No, I told him. To Penrod I said, I understand what you're saying, but we will try it this way. If that doesn't work, we can always return to the more severe punishments later. Reluctantly, Penrod released the boy. Even as the boy ran away, Abbess was asking, But we can still use the rack and thumb screws. No, I said. Later might be too late, Penrod warned. That's why I need you to keep an eye on things. For instance, I was remembering how Grimbold and his barbarians had swarmed into the castle courtyard. Please post more guards on the walls to make sure intruders can't get in. Hot coals? Abbess asked. No, I turned back to Penrod. It's not just the peasants I want to make happy. More important is keeping the goodwill of you and your men. I didn't add, so you don't come up from behind me and knife me. We will have regularly scheduled meetings where you will be free to give me your opinions. All the men. I smiled at the other guards to show I included him, not just the officers. How are things in the army? I asked. Well, the guard shuffled his feet. Do you get paid enough? The two exchanged a does she really want to know look. In the silence, Abbess asked, Fingernail extractor? No. The two guards told how Counselor Rawdon, who was in charge of giving them their pay, had lately shorted them. I will look into that, I promised. Meanwhile, please see to it that the castle defenses are fortified immediately. Both men saluted smartly before leaving. They might still think me weak, but I doubted they'd kill me while I was promising them money. Abbess poked my arm to get my attention. Stocks? He asked. Dunking in the mill pond? I was tempted to say only for you, but luckily I didn't have time. I spotted Sister Mary Ursula, who was standing by the well and had evidently heard much of our conversation. Blessed is the way of the one, she said. Abbess gave a groan in dismay. Oh, not her. That was a surprise. So apparently nobody got along well with her. Well, come to think of it, that wasn't surprising at all, but it made me wonder what exactly Mr. Rasmussen was warning me against when he said that she didn't work well with Kendrick. I figured I needed to be polite but firm. Hello, I said. I wish I had more time to talk to you, but I don't. Sister Mary Ursula couldn't be put off that easily. I guess you might be of one, she said. One, I said vaguely. Two, I was going to say. What's the difference? But the pairing of 1 and 2 like that brought me to mind something else. 1, 2, buckle my shoe, I told her. She wasn't the only one who could be obscure. She said. I surmise you were truly one with the world by how you treated that boy. You recognized his oneness. Many would not have. She glanced at Abbess. Abbess scratched his head and yawned. I did recognize his oneness, I said. And you know, I'd like to talk to you about that later. I'd like to talk to you about becoming my advisor. Could she really be the one Rasmussen program wanted me to favor? But I also need to talk to Sir Deming and Counselor Rawdon. I'd like to meet the three of you together. Rawdon? She said, shaking her head. Because she looked skeptical, I added 4 of us. 1 meeting. 1, she echoed, smiling. I'm on my way to see Counselor Rawdon right now. Friendly as the guards seemed to at my promise to investigate their salary dispute, the way to really get on their good side was to actually hand over the money due to them. I suspected that then they'd be willing to forgive me a lot. So Rawdon first. I asked Sister Mary Ursula, could you please find Sir Deming and invite him to the Great Hall? I am one with your wishes, Sister Mary Ursula said. She bowed, at the same time pinched the bridge of her nose with her thumb and forefinger and making a nasal humming noise. One. Though Abbess was looking bored, I wanted to keep him near me in case those barbarians made it past the Captain Penrod's increased castle defenses. So, Toledo-made swords are the best, I asked. But it takes a master swordsman to use one, well... Abbess flexed his amazing biceps. Amazing? Tell me about yourself as we walk to Rawdon's quarters, all right? Well, Abbess didn't need to be asked twice. Luckily, I found that all I needed to contribute to the conversation was a rapt expression and an occasional impressive or, my, that's interesting. I didn't really listen to a word of his explanations about his workout schedule nor his past triumphs. When we got to Rawdon's room, though, he wasn't there. Excuse me, I interrupted Abbess in the middle of him recounting how he saved the king of a neighboring land who had been gorged by a charging wild boar. Abbess had broken off the beast's tusk with his bare hands, then strangled it, which sounded pretty gross to me. A servant woman was on her knees in the hall scrubbing the floor, and I asked her, have you seen Councillor Rawdon? No, my lady, sorry. Abbess didn't need me to invite him to resume his story, frothing sweat on the animal's hide and hot, stinking breath and all. The servant looked as though she was quite finished with what she was saying, so I put my hand on Abbess's arm to get him to stop. But he didn't take the hint, and I had to say, excuse me, again. The woman told me, he was in his room earlier, Princess, but he's not there now. I know because I just washed the floors in front of his door, and when he left, I had to clean that part again because he left footprints in the wetness. But luckily, he came this way, and I didn't have to redo the whole hall. She was only 2 doors down from Rawdon's room, which couldn't have taken her more than 5 minutes. Abbess started talking again as we walked to the end of the hall. There I saw steps leading both up and down. What's upstairs? I interrupted Abbess. Defense battlements, servants' quarters, by which I took to mean minor servant things, since Rawdon's room was on the 2nd level, along with the family's apartments. Abbess didn't miss a beat and resumed talking about the boar. I led the way back downstairs and flagged down a servant woman who was going from room to room providing fresh flowers for the vases. She said she had not seen Rawdon. I poked my head into the great hall. Sir Deming was sitting on one of the petitioners' benches that lined the walls. He was definitely drooping, his elbows on his knees, his head resting in his hands, while Sister Mary Ursula, sitting next to him, told him, and if you acknowledge the cow's oneness with you, then ask her politely, and she will give you forth sweeter milk. It's the same with turnips. There you are, Deming said, sounding for this once happy to see me. Sorry, not quite ready yet. We haven't been able to find Rawdon, I said. I'll be glad to help you look. Maybe Abbess, Deming volunteered. He glanced from the still chattering prince to the still chattering nun, obviously thinking to the pair of them off. Sorry, I backed out, closing the doors. In case of a barbarian attack, Abbess would be a good man to have by my side. If he noticed we were under attack, that is. I couldn't be sure he'd stopped bragging about his physical prowess long enough to notice how much of anything. The door opened and a pair of male servants came out, carrying a platter with the entire roast pig, complete with the apple. It must be time for a midday meal that I had missed the last time I was here. I realized that the hunger that I had felt in the barbarian camp had evaporated once the game restarted and set me back down in the morning. But now, as this new day progressed, my stomach was once again rumbling. Not that I found a dead porker with fruit in his mouth appetizing. "Excuse me," I said to the men. Have either of you seen Houghton?" "Not since he stopped in the kitchen asking for field rations," one said. "Field rations? You mean like to take a trip, take when you're going on a trip?" The man nodded. That was odd. Sister Mary Ursula hadn't insulted him in this round of the game, so he had no reason to leave. "Did he say where he was going?" Both men shook their heads. I moved out of their way and told Abbess, "Let's check with the captain of the guard to see if Houghton has left yet." Still talking, Abbess followed me outside. While I hadn't been paying attention, he shifted to tournaments he had fought in. The proper technique for splitting a lance, which apparently was a desirable thing. I glanced at the wagon that was still parked by the supply door, even though I assumed the increased guards I had ordered had prevented any barbarians from sneaking in. I was just turning my eyes away when I noticed a shadow that moved beneath the wagon. "Abbess, look out!" I shouted. "Behind the wagon!" There was a hiss of an arrow, but no thunk of impact. Abbess had caught the arrow mid-flight. So maybe there was something to be said for brawn, even unaccompanied by a brain. With a bellow, Abbess went tearing behind the wagon before the archer had a chance to notch another one. Hiding didn't seem a kingly thing to do. I might survive the attack, but obvious cowardice wouldn't win any loyalty from my people. So fighting my instincts, I ran toward the wagon as well, yelling all the while, "Intruder alert! Intruder alert!" which sounded more science fiction than fantasy, but there was no time to worry about vocabulary. And I needed more guards immediately, because I knew from the last time that there were 3 barbarians in the courtyard, and 3 against 1 wasn't fair odds, even if the one was used to fighting off wild boar with his bare hands. On the far side of the wagon, I saw Abbess was doing quite well without me. Since he didn't have a bow, he simply used his caught arrow as a dagger. It was sticking out of the chest of one of the barbarians, now dead. Abbess had kicked the other archer in the face, and while that man rolled on the ground, Abbess was engaged in a sword fight with the third man, the man I recognized as King Grimbold. "Wait!" I started to tell Abbess, but in that moment, his sword swept off Grimbold's head. Was that an oops or not? Abbess turned to the surviving, though injured man. "Abbess, put your sword away," I said. "He's obviously not going anywhere, and I need to ask him a couple questions." Grumpily, Abbess took his sword back in its scabbard. I was aware of members of the castle guard on the wall, firing arrows over the side into the surrounding woods. "4 down," Penrod reported to me. "The rest have escaped into the forest. Do you want us to pursue them or concentrate on our defenses here?" Just what I needed, another decision. I didn't yet know if we needed to attack the barbarian camp, but in case, I didn't want to send the majority of my men chasing after a small raiding party, leaving us defenseless. Nor did I want a small party of men stumbling into the barbarian encampment. "Send 24 men after them, with clear instructions not to pursue further than..." had to estimate what was a good distance. 5 miles. If they haven't caught the barbarians by then, have them come back. While Penrod selected which men of the group should go, I turned my attention to the wounded barbarian. He was sitting up now, his back supported by the castle wall, his hands over his bruised and bleeding mouth. No doubt he was missing several teeth from Abbas's kick. His voice was slurred because of his injuries, which didn't help his accent. "You'll be done killing our king," he moaned. "You'll be done killing King Grimbald." I knew that already, but everybody else turned to look at the headless corpse. "You're one of the northern barbarians, aren't you?" I asked. The man nodded. "That's one," Abbas said. Of course, there was only one barbarian left. We could all see that. Jeez. Or was Sister Mary Ursula beginning to wear off on him? Ignoring Abbas's irrelevant remark, I asked Barbarian, "How did you come? Or why did you come?" "To be kidnapping you as the new king," he said. "To be forcing you to be handing over the crown of King the Breck the Slayer." Of course, I knew all this from last time, but I had to ask or I wouldn't be able to explain to anybody how I knew. Before I could ask about the location of his camp and the number of people in it, which was what really I wanted to know, Abbas announced, "And that's 2. "What?" I started to ask Abbas when he picked up the wagon and brought the back end down on the barbarian's head, like smashing a bug. For a few seconds, I couldn't even get my mouth to work. "What?" Abbas demanded, seeing my amazed, angry face. "You said not to use my sword." "I said I wanted to question him." "You said you wanted to ask him a couple of questions. A couple is 2. He shook his head as though unused to dealing with such stupidity. "Everybody knows that. A couple, 2, same thing. Didn't your foster parents teach you how to count?" While I was left speechless, he scratched his belly and said, "That roast pig sure looked good to me. Anybody else ready to eat?" And with that, he went back into the castle, the guards following. So just tell me 6 sentences of what happened, and that is reading log 13, chapter 15.